So you touched on a few things that Edgar Rice Burroughs is best known for: his Tarzan stories, his Mars or Barsoom series, and Pellucidar, which he best known as a exploration of a hollow Earth idea. And you also touched on the fact that your father got into these stories when he was young. He shared them with you when you were young. So what is it about these adventure novels and kind of values and tropes that they explore you think is particularly nourishing to the spirit of a young man, or any thoughts along those lines that you have?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of beginning fantasy writers and maybe modern fantasy writers try to make their fantasy worlds very believable. And the way they do that is they make things kind of crappy for everyone. So there's a torture and there's all kinds of injustice and suffering. And there's always in an Edgar Rice Burroughs story, there's always a sense of joy to the characters. They're really enjoying exploring the world. And in Tarzan's case, he's enjoying killing animals. And in John Carter's case, he's enjoying killing people with who he feels broken the code of Barsoom. He enjoys killing people, as does Conan, who's sort of an influence Burroughs hero in a way, Robert E. Howard's version of the swordsman. But the sense of joy also goes Tarzan swinging through the trees or taking his clothes off and just going down to his loincloth. There's things that Edgar Rice Burroughs enjoyed as a child or as a writer. And you see them in the characters. They just love running around, exploring things, hunting, killing things, showing off how adept they are at stuff. And they like being half naked and they like breaking the rules of civilization. And you don't get that in Game of Thrones, There's where's the joy?
Yeah, you make a great point because there's so much focus on gritty, nasty. Everybody, like you said, everybody's miserable in pop culture today. But the one of the top grossing movies of the past couple of years was Top Gun, where you could just have a good time. You could just show up, you could eat your popcorn, and you could just enjoy a fun movie. You didn't have to have your face drug across asphalt. You didn't have to see all kinds of horrible human suffering. You could just enjoy a friggin' movie, like the Dungeons and
Yeah.
Dragons movie. It was just a fun movie. Yes, there were bad things that happened in it, but you were encouraged to just have a good time. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the kind of things that the characters get into. And while you were talking, I was thinking about all those things sound very action oriented, positive, like positive as in forward moving activities where being engaged, doing things, performing, being dynamic, those are keys. Those are key concepts. And I think a lot of people need to learn that, especially young men, how to do those things, why those things are worthwhile, and to encourage them to pursue that. What do you think?
And it kind of inspires the art, I think, as well. I think Frazetta and the other artists and the comic book artists who picked up on the Burroughs material, I think that it's very easy to picture what's going on in a Burroughs novel and to want to draw it. And so there's this to take Burroughs' book from the page to a comic book page to a movie is not a hard thing to do, and that's why it's been done well so many times. I mean, there's been a few mistakes, but I think I've enjoyed most of the Tarzan related stuff. It's fun to look at, and you can tell the animators had fun animating him, and you could tell the actors had fun playing him. It's just big old hoot if you don't think too hard about the animals being killed and the natives not being represented so well. It's just a big game.
Well,
Everyone's having a good time.
when it comes to writing, though, you have to economize your words because you can't explore every idea and every detail 100% and everything you're trying to do. You're trying to get a story across and you're trying to make that happen. The things you point out, yeah, those probably would have been disturbing had he taken more time to talk about them. But that wasn't the story he was trying to tell, so he was going for a different feel. Okay, that's interesting food for thought. You had mentioned running around half naked. Because that's something that Tarzan obviously liked doing. And was there a sense of romanticizing the natural world of a more primitive society or social structure approach of man and his environment represented in ERB's works, at least that you saw?
I don't think he was trying to make a statement. I think fantasy writers and science fiction writers who really just go into their fantasy, they don't think about it, then they end up showing something about themselves. Sometimes it's a little racism. Sometimes it's princification of the women, or a shallow view of women. But sometimes it's something kind of healthy, like, isn't it fun to see this weird new world? Or let's befriend this creature and make him an ally instead of killing him. That happens in Burroughs a lot. Somebody will befriend a creature or a dog-like creature, and they'll have an animal companion. So it can be both positive and negative, but I don't think Burroughs sets out to teach us anything. I think he's just like, this guy's going to lose his clothes and he's going to make friends with this animal and he's going to save the princess. He's going to do all these fun things. And he's not trying to say clothes are bad or anything. That's just who he was. I think he had a very happy childhood. And part of being happy childhood is not being told to put your clothes on all the time. It's kind of like, oh, he's young, he's running around naked. So he wasn't shy, I have a feeling.
I gotcha. So his writing for himself was probably him having as good a time as he was trying to give the reader. He wasn't.
Yeah.
A lot of times he wasn't trying to load ideology or giving motifs, symbols into it to get a message across. At least from your reading.
Sometimes he'll just flat out tell you what he thinks, and he doesn't do it as awfully as some other writers, because sometimes what he thinks is at that time is not necessarily what I agree with or what people should be hearing. But generally, he keeps his narrator narrating and not pontificating or preaching. But he does make mistakes. He's definitely not a perfect writer.
Yeah, what writer is, because every writer is human so far. Now the AI may, God in heaven help us all. The AI might avoid that pitfall, but for humans, the temptation is very strong. You think you're trying to get a point across in a story, and you don't know if you've nailed it. You just go ahead and put it out there. You just put the word,
Yeah.
so no one can misinterpret you. I may be a little guilty of that myself, at least in one book, but that's okay. Speaking of this adventurous idea, I did see a good quote from Ray Bradbury, himself a very worthy writer, that talking about Edgar Rice Burroughs, he said, by giving romance and adventure to a whole generation of boys, Burroughs caused them to go out and decide to become special.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good endorsement right there, because you're talking about exploring, befriending things that are different than you, trying out different things, getting into scrapes, living by your wits. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's empowering.
Yeah, it's great to hear that from Ray Bradbury, whose work is so different. I mean, especially Fahrenheit 451, it's a classic dystopian novel where no one has any fun. But I think the urge to write and become a writer probably was something that Ray Bradbury got when he was reading Mars books by Edgar Rice Burroughs.
He has more to say about ERB